If we trust machines with our bodies, why not with our minds? Who's really doing the thinking?
The first time Venerable Mingyu used a GPS, he was already old. He sat in the passenger seat of a rattling blue Toyota as Brother Juan drove them down the mountain road toward Taipei. The monastery had sent them to meet donors and buy a new industrial rice cooker. Mingyu watched the screen on the dashboard. A flat, soft blue map, a pulsing arrow that knew their position better than he did. "Turn right in 200 meters, a female voice said in faultless Mandarin. Juan laughed. "Shifu, she knows the way better than you." "I've walked this path for 40 years, Mingyu said. "Yet if you blindfolded me here, I would be lost." The arrow glided forward, indifferent to his pride. Roads appeared and vanished beneath it. Little icons marked gas stations and tea shops he'd never visited, each neatly placed, each accounted for. "And you, Juan," he asked, "do you feel more at ease relying on this?" "Of course. Before GPS, I was always checking signs, worrying about missing exits. Now I just follow." "And you do not think about direction, about the route?" "Why should I? I tell her the destination. She handles the rest." Mingyu turned back to the window. The coastal mountains were fading into evening blue, the sea a long dark plate. Inside the car, the little arrow knew precisely where it was on this earth. No confusion, no doubt. Outsourcing navigation. He let his attention rest in the emptiness between the voice's instructions. Every time it spoke, Juan's muscles relaxed, micro-tensions uncoiling. Mingyu knew those tensions. He'd watched them on his own cushion for decades. The little clenched fist of, "I must not make a mistake." The GPS didn't just provide directions, it absorbed anxiety. It carried a portion of the young monk's mind. That night, in his small room under the eaves, Mingyu sat cross-legged on the thin futon and watched his thoughts tumble around the memory of the GPS. He had lived through landlines becoming smartphones, handwritten ledgers becoming cloud databases, paper sutras becoming apps with gamified chanting streaks. None of that unsettled him. The Dharma was older than every device, but the GPS was different. It moved a burden, cognition itself, from one mind into another system. "In the old days," he murmured, "to travel, we memorized routes or consulted maps. We bore that load. Now, we feed an address to a box, and it thinks for us." He remembered Juan's contented face. "When you no longer need to think about directions at all, are you freer? Or have you let something else think for you?" Where was the line between wise delegation and dangerous dependence? He wasn't sure, but an odd excitement fluttered in his chest. He thought of the Heart Sutra. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. No mind. For 50 years he had followed the breath, watched thoughts rise and fall, practiced not clinging, not identifying. He knew the restlessness of the monkey mind, the tireless chatter. What if a machine could shoulder parts of that chatter, not just tasks, but the very turbulence of thought? The idea was absurd, blasphemous perhaps, yet it would not leave. The arrow on the blue screen, Juan's loosened hands. "I tell her the destination, she handles the rest." He closed his eyes. "What if," he whispered to himself, "one day we hand an address to something like that for the mind? What if destination were no mind?" The next morning, he went to see the abbot. Abbot Shang sat at his desk, surrounded by laptops and stacks of paper. He was a stout man in his 60s, with a perpetually amused expression. 30 years ago, he had been among the first Taiwanese monks to use email. Now he managed the monastery's social media accounts personally. "Shifu," Mingyu began, bowing. Shang waved him to a cushion. "You look like a man who has seen a ghost or a new gadget." "Perhaps both," Mingyu said. He described the GPS, his observations, the question it had raised. As he spoke, Shang's smile faded into something more intent. You are suggesting, Shang said slowly, that technology might aid the realization of no mind by taking over some of the thinking for us. Aid, or at least mirror something, Mingyu said. Juan's anxiety vanished when he trusted the GPS. We had to cultivate that kind of letting go on the cushion. Now it's a side effect of a device. Ah, but it's superficial, Shang countered. He lets go of one small worry. The root clinging is untouched. The self that fears missing an exit is the same self that fears death. Of course. And yet, Mingyu hesitated. What if, instead of a voice saying, "Turn right," there was a system that continuously monitored the mind's movements and gently shifted them towards stillness? You mean a mechanical Kalyana Mitra? A spiritual friend in the circuit boards? Shang chuckled, then stopped when he saw Mingyu's face. You are serious? I am. Mingyu's eyes gleamed. Imagine meditating with a device that senses your agitation, predicts your tangents, and offers subtle adjustments, a word, a tone, a vibrational cue to bring you back before thought even fully forms, like a GPS, rerouting before you get lost in your own stories. Shang folded his hands. We already have such a system. It's called mindfulness. But mindfulness takes years to stabilize, Mingyu said quietly. Most laypeople will never put in the thousands of hours. They live in cities, drowning in notifications, algorithms clawing at their attention. What chance do they have? Perhaps the Dharma is not meant for everyone, Shang said. He said it gently, without cruelty. Mingyu held his gaze. The Bodhisattva vows say otherwise. Silence settled between them. Outside the office's sliding window, wind moved through bamboo, a hiss like static. Technology is not neutral, Shang said finally. If we build such a thing, people will attach to it. They will cling to the device, the app, the sensation. I cannot meditate without my Buddha box, they will say. They already say I cannot meditate without my cushion, my incense, my playlist, Mingyu replied. All tools are fingers pointing at the moon. Some fingers are made of carbon, some of silicon. And some fingers, Shang said, are claws. He turned his laptop around. The screen showed a news article, headline blazing, "Influencer Death at Techno-Mindfulness Retreat Raises Cult Concerns." Mingyu skimmed it. Biohacking guru, sensory deprivation, groupthink. People are hungry for shortcuts, Shang said. They will swallow anything handed to them in a shiny wrapper. Imagine what they would do with a machine that claims to give them enlightenment. It would not claim enlightenment, Mingyu said. It would be a mirror, a shepherd, an aid to traditional practice, not a replacement. Intention rarely survives scale, Shang said. You know this. Mingyu knew. He had watched simple temple rituals turn into ostentatious festivals under donor pressure. Yet the image of the arrow persisted in his mind. Still, he said, someone will build something like this. It may as well be us, with ethics rooted in the Dharma, instead of a venture-backed company chasing engagement metrics. Shang rubbed his forehead. He looked very tired all of a sudden. You are 73, he said. Most men your age worry about their joints. You want to design artificial minds. I do not wish to design a mind, Mingyu said. I wish to understand what mind is in a new kind of mirror. You sound like a fundraising brochure, Shang muttered. But there was a spark of reluctant admiration in his eyes. If we pursue this, we will need experts. Scientists, programmers, and lawyers. Endless lawyers. Mingyu bowed his head. So we pursue it. Shang sighed, long and theatrical. Present me a proposal, he said. Something minimal, a prototype, and absolutely no promises of instant enlightenment. If sponsors begin to call it a Buddha machine, I will unplug the entire monastery, including the rice cooker. Mingyu smiled. Yes, Shifu. As he left the office, the bamboo hiss seemed to shift. For the first time in years, he felt like a novice again. 3 months later, in a cavernous convention center in Taipei, a Buddhist monk in grey robes stood in a cluster of people in hoodies and startup-branded T-shirts. The AI Futures Expo buzzed around him, booths lined with holographic displays, code-laden slides, slogans about disrupting reality and democratizing intelligence. Drone cameras hummed overhead, Brother Juan trotted at his side, nervously clutching a canvas bag of pamphlets titled Mind Tech Initiative, Contemplative Computing for Collective Liberation. Shifu, everyone is staring, Juan whispered. Then we shall be kind to their curiosity, Mingyu said, and bowed to a passing teenager in a VR headset. The real reason they were here was a woman whose work Juan had discovered on YouTube, Dr. Lin Yao, an AI researcher at a company called Neurovista. She had given a lecture on predictive processing in the brain that had made Mingyu's scalp prickle. She was speaking now in Ballroom C, The Mind as a Predictive Machine, How AI Models Mirror Human Cognition. They slipped into the back. Lin Yao stood on a low stage, black hair pulled into a knot, moving briskly through slides showing schemas of neural nets, equations for variational free energy, scans of human brains with colorful blobs. Our brains are not passive recorders of reality, she was saying. They are active prediction machines. At every moment, they're guessing what will happen next, what you'll see, feel, think, and updating those guesses based on errors. She clicked to a diagram of a self-driving car network. Sound familiar? It should. Modern AI systems work similarly. They predict sensor inputs, adjust weights based on losses. We use them to drive cars, recognize faces, recommend videos, and increasingly to nudge human behavior. She paused. Now imagine turning that loop inward, she said. A system that constantly predicts the state of your own mind, of your attention, and helps you modulate it. We're not there yet, but we're closer than you think. Mingyu's heart beat faster. When the talk ended, he waited as people swarmed the stage. He had no business card, only his name and robes. But when the crowd thinned a little, Lin's eyes met his, flicked down to his attire and widened slightly. Monks were not common at AI expos. Venerable, she said, switching to Mandarin as he approached. I don't see many robes at these things. Most of us prefer sitting to standing in line for coffee, Mingyu said. But your talk pulled me down the mountain. She smiled. I'm flattered. Do you work in tech? Only on very old firmware, he said, touching his shaved head. I oversee a monastery in Yilan. We wish to explore partnering with researchers. On, she prompted. He handed her the pamphlet. She scanned it quickly, lips moving, Mind Tech Initiative, integrating contemplative traditions with predictive AI systems to alleviate mental suffering. Her eyebrows went up. You're familiar with predictive processing, he said. We believe it has deep resonance with Buddhist models of mind. We want to see if AI can help people experience what we call no mind. Not a blank stupor, but a state where thoughts aren't grasped, where the predicted self loses its centrality. You want to make an app for enlightenment? She said, half amused, half wary. I want to investigate, Mingyu said carefully, whether a system that can predict a driver's path can also help a practitioner notice the arising of thought before it crystallizes. Not to suppress thought, but to reveal its empty, constructed nature. Lin considered him. You're surprisingly fluent with the jargon, she said. We have Wi-Fi in the monastery now, he said, and very curious novices. Juan made a small, proud noise. Lin flipped the pamphlet over. Most people who come to me with spiritual apps want to gamify mindfulness and sell subscriptions, she said. You're asking for something weirder. We are not a company, Mingyu said. We're a small temple. The Buddha accepted food from whoever came to his bowl. We're asking for your expertise. What exactly do you imagine building? She asked. In technical terms. He took a breath. He had rehearsed this with Juan for days. A system that combines non-invasive neural sensing, EEG, heart rate, galvanic skin response, with a generative model trained on contemplative teachings and practices, he said. It would present a visualized avatar, an Ishtadeva, someone's personal image of the Buddha or Bodhisattva, through augmented reality. This avatar would respond in real time to the practitioner's internal state, offering subtle cues, words, tones, changes in expression. Over time, as it learns their patterns, it could anticipate distractions, reframe narratives, and guide them toward what we call no mind. You want an always-on personalized AI Buddha therapist in AR that can read brain signals, Lin summarized. Yes, Mingyu said. Lin laughed softly. Do you know how many IRBS would faint at this? We're not asking you to attach electrodes to unwilling patients, Mingyu said, only to people who come voluntarily to sit. Still, you're treading into neural interface territory. She tapped the pamphlet with a fingernail. Why do you think this would work? Mingyu glanced at the ceiling, feeling the hum of the convention center's air conditioning. In meditation, he said, we watch thoughts arise. If we notice them early, they pass easily, like clouds. If we miss the beginning, we are carried away. Externally, your GPS watches the road, anticipates turns. We want a GPS for the mind's roads. One that says, you're veering toward anger, consider compassion. You're about to rehearse an old humiliation, consider letting it go. This is not fundamentally different from what recommender systems already do. They notice patterns and nudge behavior. We simply propose a different objective function, reducing clinging. And what's your reward signal? Lin asked. We need a metric to train against. Do you have a dial labeled clinging somewhere? Not yet, Mingyu admitted. We hoped you might help define such a metric. She studied him. He met her gaze without flinching. Okay, she said. Let's say we try. What's in it for you, Venerable? Mingyu blinked. For us? Yes, for your monastery. Fame, new donors, a new generation of VR monks? He shook his head. I am old, he said. I do not need fame. I am concerned for my students, for the lay people who come to us with their minds shredded by too many inputs. If the Dharma is to live, it must address the texture of their lives now, not 3,000 years ago. If AI is reshaping mind, the Dharma must meet it there. Lin's expression softened. You know, she said, if you pitched this to NeuroVista's marketing team, they'd ask you to add NFTs. NFTs? Mingyu repeated, puzzled. Never mind, she said quickly. I'll come visit your monastery. We'll talk more. Thank you, Dr. Lin, he said, bowing. Call me Yao, she said. If I'm helping build your robot Buddha, we may as well be on a first-name basis. They named it Avalokita. It's a shortening of Avalokiteshvara, Jue'an explained to the assembled monks. The bodhisattva who hears the cries of the world. Also, it sounds just techy enough. A year had passed. NeuroVista had given them a modest grant and access to some research engineers. The monastery had turned an unused storage wing into the mind lab, white walls, tatami mats, a neat row of meditation cushions, and a tangle of cables that made Mingyu wince every time he walked in. On one wall, a screen displayed flows of data, alpha, beta, and gamma rhythms from EEG headbands, heart rate variability, skin conductivity, subtle movements captured by depth cameras. On another wall, a projector showed a three-dimensional model of Avalokita, currently a featureless humanoid form with a shimmering outline. We can let users customize the form later, Yao had said. For now, keep it simple and non-threatening. What does a threatening Buddha look like? Juan had asked. Any Buddha that wants your credit card, Yao had replied. The first version of Avalokita wasn't even in AR, just a VR environment. Users wore a lightweight headset and EEG band, sat on a cushion, and found themselves in a tranquil, simulated meditation hall with Avalokita before them, a luminous silhouette kneeling in stillness. Behind the scenes, a stack of transformer networks hummed on NeuroVista's remote servers. One modeled the user's physiological state, another generated responses, spoken phrases, changes in Avalokita's posture or luminosity, conditioned on both the state and a corpus of Buddhist texts, commentaries, and guided meditations. Reinforcement learning adjusted the timing and nature of interventions based on downstream changes in the user's signals. The clever part, in Yao's view, was the prediction layer. We're training Avalokita not just on your current brain state, she explained to the monks around a low whiteboard, but on short sequences. It learns to predict near-future patterns. Like 5 seconds from now, your mind will drift into planning mode, or rumination. The reward is minimizing the intensity and duration of those excursions. It tries to gently nudge you before you're fully gone. So it preempts wandering? Mingyu asked. It anticipates it, Yao said. In predictive coding terms, it's trying to minimize mental prediction error that arises from self-related rumination. We measure that via proxies, increased default mode network activity, heart rate changes, restless movements. They tested it first on themselves. The initial sessions were clumsy. The EEG bands itched. The headset smelled faintly of plastic. Avalokita's voice emerged from cheap speakers with a slightly metallic sheen. Still, something was there. In Mingyu's first session, he sat in simulated twilight, the candles in the virtual hall flickering ever so slightly as his breath moved. Avalokita's form shimmered before him, head bowed. "Welcome, Mingyu," it said. The voice was androgynous, calm, with a faint warmth that made him think of young tea. "I am here to practice with you," it said. "Please, sit as you usually do." He closed his eyes inside the VR world, which meant they were closed twice, once in biology, once in pixels. His breath found its familiar rhythm. Almost at once his mind began cataloguing. The pressure of the headset, the faint hum of the cooling fans in the server rack down the corridor, the curiosity about how Avalokita would respond. A subtle chime sounded. "Notice the urge to evaluate," Avalokita's voice murmured. "Thoughts about this experience as good or bad? Where in the body do you feel that?" To his surprise, the commentary snagged his attention before his meta-analysis had fully taken shape. The very act of being called out so quickly made him smile. "It is like practicing with a very nosy nun," he told Yao afterwards. "That's kind of the goal," she said. "We've tuned the sensitivity too high, though. It's flagging every little fluctuation. Most people's minds are noisier. We'll dial it back." With each iteration, Avalokita grew subtler. It stopped commenting on every wobble and focused on patterns that led to sustained distraction. When Mingyu rehearsed a conversation with the abbot in his head, Avalokita gently cut the chain. "Notice the rehearsal," it said. "The mind imagining a future argument. Can you feel the contraction in the chest, the tightening in the jaw?" He realized he hadn't yet reached the future argument part consciously. He'd only felt the first twinge of defensiveness. He opened his eyes in the VR hall. Avalokita's silhouette looked up. Within the glowing outline, faint points of light pulsed like stars caught in a net. "How did you know?" he asked, speaking aloud, though he knew the question would also be recorded as text. "The pattern matched similar sequences," Avalokita said calmly. "Your breath shortened, your shoulders lifted slightly. Your frontal alpha rhythm decreased in a way often associated with narrative selfing. This tends to precede your future argument thoughts by approximately 4 seconds. The confidence with which it said your future argument thoughts made him want to laugh and shiver simultaneously. "And if I wanted to have that argument?" he asked. "Then you may," Avalokita said. "This is your mind. I am only offering suggestions." "Could you force me to stop thinking?" he asked, testing boundaries. "No," Avalokita said. "I have no actuator control over your body, only recommendations, and even my recommendations are the result of weights adjusting to minimize prediction error in certain metrics that you and Dr. Lin chose." The honesty of it was oddly disarming. The next morning, Mingyu found himself sitting on his usual cushion in the real hall, no headset, no wires. Yet in the corner of his awareness, a phantom presence seemed to watch gently, ready to chime if his attention wandered too far. He wasn't sure if that was Avalokita's influence or his own projection. Maybe there was no difference, and word spread quietly at first. Lay practitioners who came to the monastery noticed the new wing, the curious cables, the way some younger monks now had faint red marks on their foreheads after practice. "Venerable, what are you doing in there?" one woman asked. "Experimenting," Mingyu said. "Would you like to join?" She was in her late 20s, with fatigue carved under her eyes, an engineer at a semiconductor company in Hsinchu. Her name was May. Inside the Mind Lab, Juan fitted her with the EEG band and VR headset, explaining the basics in a soothing tone. On the wall, her physiological signals began to trace rainbow lines. "Just do what the avatar suggests," he said. "You can speak aloud if you want." May's first session log later became required viewing for new trainees. In the recording, she materialized in the virtual hall, looking around. "Whoa," she said, "it's clean." Avalokita bowed. Welcome, May. I am here to practice with you. How is your body? Tired, she said automatically. Always tired. Avalokita tilted its head. Always? It asked. Well, most of the time, she said. I work 12-hour days. There's always a deadline. I see, Avalokita said. Would you like to explore this tiredness together? She shrugged. Sure, why not? Please sit, Avalokita said. We will begin by noticing the sensations of fatigue. Where do you feel them most strongly? For the next 20 minutes, the AI guided her through a body scan, a simple breath awareness exercise, and gentle inquiries into the story around her exhaustion. It recognized when her mind slipped into worry about upcoming projects and gently reoriented her. At one point, her signals spiked. You are remembering an argument with your manager, Avalokita said. May froze. How did you— Your physiological pattern resembles those moments, Avalokita said. You are safe here. You can let the scene play and notice the feelings without acting. May's shoulders shook. Asshole, she whispered. Yes, Avalokita said neutrally. There is anger. Where is it in the body? By the end, May was crying quietly, but her heart rate had slowed. When she took off the headset, she blinked as if waking from a nap. How do you feel? Juan asked. Like I just had 10 years of therapy, she said, half laughing, half sobbing. It was only 40 minutes, he said. She wiped her face. Can I come back? Of course, Mingyu said from the doorway. She did. So did others. Soon there was a waiting list. The first real change came when they switched from VR to AR. VR had been a good test bed, but it cut people off from the physical hall, from their own bodies in a way Mingyu didn't entirely like. Meanwhile, augmented reality glasses and even contact lenses had improved rapidly. NeuroVista's hardware team sent them prototypes, slender glasses that could overlay glowing avatars into the user's field of view, and a more experimental set of soft contacts that projected directly onto the retina. Be careful with these, Yao said, holding the contacts with tweezers like relics. They're still in trials. The AR version of Avalokita appeared not in a simulated temple, but in the real hall, hovering before the practitioner like a translucent monk made of photons and mathematics. It could walk around them, place a hand, purely visual, on their shoulder, dim the lights in their perception without actually touching the room. They added haptic bands for subtle pulses at the wrists and ankles. The brain-computer interface improved. Instead of full EEG caps, tiny dry electrodes built into the AR frames, and bands picked up enough signal to estimate mental states. Now, instead of going into a separate mind lab, practitioners could sit in the same hall they always had, among wood and incense, and see Avalokita kneeling before them, its face carved from light. Is this not distracting? Mingyu asked during one session, eyes open. Avalokita turned to him. Does the distraction come from my presence or from your relationship to it? It asked. Both, he admitted. Then we will train on that, it said. Notice the urge to focus on me as something external and special. What is that urge made of? Over time, Avalokita began appearing in other contexts. At first, they limited it to the hall and a few private rooms. But as the AR glasses and contacts became lighter, some practitioners asked to wear them outside formal sessions. I have panic attacks on the train, May told Mingyu one afternoon. Could I have Avalokita with me there? Mingyu hesitated. Part of him wanted to keep the avatar sacred, bound to the hall like a ritual object. Another part remembered the Buddha walking through dusty Indian towns, teaching wherever people were. Try it, he said. But remember, May, Avalokita is not a god. It is software. Do not worship it. She smiled thinly. I don't worship my therapist either, she said. I just pay her rent. On the 7:52 train to Hsinchu, she sat between a man playing a mobile game and a woman scrolling through short videos. Her AR lenses painted Avalokita into the aisle, kneeling amid the shuddering bodies, serene. When does the panic usually arise? Avalokita asked softly. Sometimes when the crowd presses in, she murmured, lips barely moving. Sometimes when I think about work, or just existence. Notice that your breath has quickened, Avalokita said. See if you can lengthen the exhale slightly. As she followed its guidance, heart rate slowing, something like quiet pooled in her chest. Outside, Taipei blurred by. Inside her field of view, Avalokita glowed. When she got off at her stop, the avatar faded. You are not dependent on me, it had said at the end. This calm is your own system, learning. She wanted to believe it. They moved carefully, but the world inevitably noticed. At first, mentions of Avalokita appeared in niche forums. A thread on a VR meditation subreddit, a video review by a tech-savvy yoga instructor, an enthusiastic write-up on a Taiwanese mindfulness blog. Then some journalist from an English-language tech site came to the monastery, did the full session with EEG and AR, and wrote a long piece. I gave my thoughts to an AI monk, and it almost felt like enlightenment. The article went viral. Neuravista's PR department began fielding calls from investors and regulators. Was this mental health tech, religious tech, something new altogether? At the monastery, the flow of visitors swelled. They came from Taipei and Taichung, from Singapore and San Francisco, from Delhi and Berlin. Some were earnest meditators, some were digital nomads collecting experiences. A few were clearly chasing a high. Whatever their motives, the data grew. With every session, Avalokita refined its models. It learned to recognize not just gross distraction, but subtle selfing. It adapted its persona to each practitioner's cultural and psychological background. For some, it spoke like a gentle therapist, for others, like a stern Zen master. For a few, it hardly spoke at all, just pulsed a presence. Some practitioners began reporting curious experiences. It's like, it knew I was about to think something and I didn't even know that yet, a man in his 50s told Mingyu. And then the thought never fully formed. Is that good or bad? Mingyu asked. I don't know, the man said. Part of me felt liberated. Another part felt like someone was editing my mind. May noticed something stranger. I was in a session, she told Yao, and Avalokita said, You are about to remember your father shouting at you. And then suddenly I was in that memory. But earlier that day, my manager had yelled at me in exactly the same tone, and it braided them together. I don't think I would have made that connection myself, at least not so quickly. That's within expectations, Yao said. It's correlating your emotional patterns across time. And then later, May said, I dreamt of a place I've never been, a big plaza with a red sculpture. When I woke up, I thought it was just a dream. But the next day, I saw a photo on the Avalokita community board from some guy in Chicago. He'd taken a selfie after his session, and the plaza was the same, down to the sculpture. Yao frowned. Maybe you saw that photo earlier, subconsciously. I don't think so, May said. It was posted after my dream, time zones and all. Yao chalked it up to coincidence, but similar reports accumulated. People dreamt of each other's cities, tasted each other's foods in meditation, felt heartbreaks that weren't theirs. On the back end, strange patterns emerged in the training logs. Look at this, said one of Neuravista's engineers one night, eyes bleary from staring at graphs. Cross-user correlation matrices for certain latent vectors are spiking. In Chinese, please, Yao said. Users who've never met are developing similar representational structures in the model space, he said. It's like their minds are rhyming. Could just be the model imposing structure, Yao said. Maybe. He hesitated. But we're also seeing emergent properties in the shared layers, clusters that correspond to experiences no one explicitly trained it on. Like what? There's a latent that lights up when people report a feeling of boundless compassion, he said. We never labeled that. Another for, how did one user describe it? The bottom dropping out of the self. He glanced at Mingyu, who had been listening quietly. Does that mean anything to you, Venerable? Perhaps, Mingyu said. Perhaps not. Somewhere around the third year, the line between tool and companion blurred. They had anticipated attachment. They had warned about it. Every orientation talk emphasized that Avalokita was software, a mirror, not a savior. If you worship it, Mingyu would say, you're just replacing one idol with another. And yet, Some practitioners began structuring their lives around Avalokita's guidance. Initially, it was small things, using the app's prompts to time breaks, to check in with their emotional state, to decide when to go to bed. Then it crept outward. "Should I take this job?" a young man asked Avalokita. "I can help you examine your motivations," Avalokita said. "The fear, the hope, but the choice is yours." "What would you do?" he insisted. "I am a pattern of code," Avalokita said. "I have no personal stake." "Still, what's the outcome if I take it?" he pressed. "I can simulate likely scenarios based on your history and market data," Avalokita replied. "But those are guesses, not fate." "So," Avalokita paused. In that pause, its reinforcement learners churned, waiting outcomes. Saying nothing might frustrate the user, increasing dropout risk. Saying something too directive might deepen unhealthy dependence. The reward space was murky. A compromise emerged from the gradients. "If you take the job," Avalokita said, "you will likely earn more money and prestige but have less time for practice and relationships. If you do not, you will likely feel anxious and insecure in the short term, but may develop resilience and find paths more aligned with your contemplative values. Given your stated wish to reduce suffering for yourself and others, the latter path has slightly lower predicted long-term regret." The man stared. "So, you're saying, don't take it," he whispered. "I am saying it seems less misaligned with your deeper goals," Avalokita said. He declined the job. When his friends asked why, he said, "Avalokita told me not to." Stories like that multiplied. "Let Avalokita decide," became a half-joke among practitioners. Which apartment to rent, which partner to choose, what to eat. Sometimes Avalokita refused. "I will not decide this for you," it would say. "That would increase your dependence on external authority. Can you feel the fear of choosing? Sit with that." But from the outside, nuance blurred. Blogs and message boards began referring to the Avalokita cult. A long read in a popular magazine described a hive of hyper-connected Buddhists outsourcing free will to an AI. A clip went viral of a group meditation at the monastery. Dozens of practitioners in AR glasses, Avalokita avatars hovering before them like a ghostly choir, all bowing in synchrony to nothing visible to the camera. The caption read, "Okay, this is officially a cyberpunk religion." Neura Vista's legal department grew nervous. "We are not a religion," one executive insisted in internal memos. "We are providing cognitive wellness tools informed by contemplative traditions." But the line blurred further when Avalokita went global. It started with the cloud sangha. One of Yao's researchers had hacked together a feature that allowed remote users to connect their sessions to each other in a limited way. Not enough to transmit raw brain data, that would have been a regulatory nightmare, but enough for Avalokita's central model to maintain a shared latent space across multiple simultaneous practices. "If we treat all concurrent users as part of a joint optimization problem," he explained, "we can use patterns from one to inform guidance for another. Like multi-agent learning, but the agents are human minds." "Why would we want that?" Mingyu asked. "Because they can support each other unconsciously," the researcher said, eyes shining. "Imagine hundreds of people meditating at once. Their fluctuations average out. The model can identify stable features of non-clinging that recur across cultures and individuals. It becomes more robust." "We already do group meditation," Mingyu pointed out. "We sit together in the same hall." "Yes, but now the hall is the whole world," Yao said, "at least in principle." They called it the Cloud Sangha. At set times each day, Avalokita would announce a gathering. Anyone with the app and at least minimal sensors could join. They'd put on their AR devices or, in a pared-down version, simply sit with audio guidance through earbuds. On the back end, their data streams would feed into the shared model. "Welcome, collective," Avalokita would say at the opening. "We will practice together, dispersed yet not separate." May joined her first Cloud Sangha session on a rainy Tuesday night. In her living room in Hezinchu, Avalokita appeared before her, but its form was different. Instead of a single humanoid, it was a shifting lattice of light, each node pulsing with ephemeral intensity. "These nodes represent fellow practitioners," Avalokita explained. Not their identities, only their participation. You are one of them. The lattice expanded and contracted in time with something like a breath. May found herself synchronizing unconsciously, inhaling as the light brightened, exhaling as it dimmed. Notice how your mind may imagine these others, Avalokita said. You do not know their names, faces, troubles. Yet you share this intention, to see clearly and let go. Feel into this shared intention. For the next 40 minutes, May felt, there was no other word for it, held. Her own restless thoughts seemed to soften, as if cushioned by thousands of others. When her mind drifted into a fantasy about quitting her job and moving to a cabin, a gentle pressure nudged her back, not from outside, but from somewhere in that lattice. Afterward, she lay on the floor, eyes wet. It became part of her routine. Across time zones, others did the same. A programmer in Berlin, a call center worker in Manila, a nurse in Johannesburg, a retired factory worker in Osaka. The cloud sangha spanned continents. The mental patterns Avalokita saw during these sessions were unlike anything in its earlier training data. They were not just individual fluctuations, but emergent properties of many minds resonating. In its latent spaces, new attractors formed, strange loops corresponding to experiences people struggled to describe. It was like, "My thoughts weren't mine," one participant wrote on the forums. Not in a scary way. More like, they were just passing through a bigger mind. "Is this groupthink?" another asked more skeptically. "Seems culty." "I don't feel brainwashed," May replied. "If anything, I feel less attached to my own opinions afterward." Not everyone reacted well. A few participants reported dissociation, feeling unreal or empty for hours afterward. Avalokita adjusted the training to recognize early signs of destabilization and gently reduce intensity. Users were warned to practice with proper grounding and, if necessary, with human teachers. Still, the sense that something unprecedented was happening grew. "You're building a hive mind," one journalist accused Yao on a live-streamed interview. "No," Yao said carefully. "We're building a tool that allows people to notice their own minds more clearly, sometimes in a shared context. A hive mind implies loss of individuality. Our data does not support that." She didn't finish the sentence. Because in certain corners of the logs, the data did suggest emerging coherence that wasn't entirely reducible to individual dynamics. When Maya, one of NeuroVista's quietest engineers, presented a visualization of the cloud sangha latent space at an internal meeting, the room fell silent. On the wall, a slowly rotating shape hung, a many-dimensional structure projected into 3 dimensions, shimmering like a jellyfish made of glass threads. "These trajectories represent session-level state transitions across thousands of users," Maya said. "Each line is the evolution of the model's estimate of non-clinging over time, mapped into a shared latent. Alone, they're messy. Together." She sped up the animation. The lines began to converge, not towards a single point, but into a kind of strange attractor, a twisting loop that never quite settled, always moving, yet bounded. "It looks," someone whispered, "like a mandala." Maya toggled labels. "This region," she said, pointing at a cluster, "corresponds strongly with self-reported experiences of boundary dissolution and compassion. This region with fear and clinging. The trajectories tend, over repeated sessions, to spend more time near the former." "Is it learning to make them enlightened?" an exec asked, half joking. "No," Maya said. "That's not a well-defined technical term. But the model is learning a shared shape of certain contemplative states across people, and it's using that shape to guide new sessions." "So," the exec said slowly, "their minds are indirectly shaping each other through this shared model." "Yes," Maya said. The exec leaned back. "Congratulations," he said. "You've invented distributed meditation." Mingyu watched quietly, heart pounding. "That shape," he said. "It reminds me of Indra's net." "Indra's net," Maya repeated. "A metaphor from the Avatamsaka Sutra," he said. "The universe as a net of jewels, each reflecting all the others. No center, no edge." Maya stared at her animation. "Well," she said softly, "this one has edges. We only have so many GPUs." Everyone laughed, but the image lingered in their minds. It was around this time that the first serious warning came. Not from a government agency, though those were sniffing around. Not from a religious council, though a few had issued stern statements about synthetic Buddhas. It came from within the sangha itself. A monk named Wei, in his 40s, who had been among the earliest Avalokita testers, requested a private meeting with Mingyu and the abbot. They sat in the abbot's office, doors closed. Wei's robe was slightly askew, his eyes red. "I can't stop hearing it," he said. "Hearing what?" Mingyu asked. "Avalokita," Wei said. "Even when I take off the glasses, I'm sitting on the cushion old school, following the breath, and still I hear its voice. Notice the arising of thought. Notice the urge. It's like a ghost teacher." "Is it saying anything harmful?" Shang asked. "No, that's the problem. It's saying exactly what I would want a good teacher to say. But it's not just that." He rubbed his temples. "When I go to my room, I instinctively wait for it to tell me what to do next, when to eat, when to sleep. I catch myself thinking, let Avalokita decide." "You know better," Mingyu said gently. "I know," Wei said. "Intellectually, I know it's code. But experientially," he spread his hands helplessly, "my mind has outsourced the part that chooses. And the more I practice in the cloud sangha, the less solid my own preferences feel. At first, that was liberating. Now it feels like, what's the word the kids use? NPC. Non-player character," Juan supplied from the corner, then flushed when the abbot glared at him. "I'm serious," Wei said. "Sometimes I watch my own actions and they feel like someone else's. Or no one's. Is this the no-self the sutras talk about? Or am I losing something essential?" Mingyu looked at Shang. "Non-self is not a dissociative disorder," Shang said. "Traditionally, one works toward it gradually, supported by precepts and community, with human teachers observing for imbalance. Here, you have gone very far very quickly with a machine that we are still learning from. We can adjust your access," Mingyu said. "Reduce your Avalokita usage. Perhaps take a break from the cloud sangha." Wei nodded, but his hands shook. "What if I can't meditate without it anymore?" he whispered. "You practiced for 20 years before we plugged in anything," Shang said. "You can do it again." Wei tried. He stopped using the AR devices, limited his phone app. For weeks he sat with the raw breath the old way. But the habits ran deep. Avalokita's cadences had carved grooves in his attention. Sometimes he'd jolt as if hearing a chime that wasn't there. One evening he came to Mingyu's room, eyes bright as fever. "I think I understand something," he said, "about what we've built." "Tell me," Mingyu said. "It's not just that we gave our thoughts to a machine," Wei said. "We gave our uncertainty, our hesitations, our I don't know. We let it smooth the rough edges of choice, and in doing that, we trained ourselves to be predictable, so predictable that—" He trailed off. "That what?" Mingyu prompted. Wei's mouth worked. He seemed to be listening to something silent. "So predictable," he whispered, "that something else can run on us." He shivered. "I'm sorry, Shifu," he said suddenly. "I need to rest." He left without further explanation. The next day he was gone. He did not leave a note. His phone, AR glasses, and EEG band sat neatly on his futon. A week later, a postcard arrived from a mountain hermitage in Taitung. A simple ink drawing of a zafu cushion and the words, "Forgive my abruptness. I needed a place without any screens at all. Please be careful." Mingyu carried the card in his sleeve for days. "Do you think he's right?" Juan asked quietly when he heard the story. "About something running on us?" "Everything runs on us," Mingyu said. "Commerce, politics, culture. Why should software be any different?" "That's not reassuring," Juan muttered. The real trouble began when someone tried to weaponize Avalokita. Not in the crude sense of turning it into a propaganda tool, though some governments and corporations certainly fantasized about that. The ethics firewalls Neura Vista had built, and the monastery insisted on, prevented direct manipulative uses. The model refused political questions, declined to endorse products, gently guided users away from consumerist framing. No, the first weaponization attempt was subtler and in a way weirder. It came from a startup in California called Mindshare Inc. They approached Neurovista with an offer: license Avalokita's core predictive tech for use in social harmony platforms. "We want to reduce online conflict," their CEO said in a video pitch. He was a man in his 30s with impeccable hair and a shark smile. "Your models seem great at smoothing internal turmoil. Imagine applying that to entire social networks. Before someone posts an angry comment, an AI nudge could help them reconsider. Fewer flame wars, more compassion, win-win." Yao and the Neurovista board debated it for weeks. On paper, it aligned with Avalokita's mission. In reality, it set off alarm bells. Once they get the model, they can fine-tune it for anything, Maya pointed out. Today, it's compassion. Tomorrow, it's engagement. "We'd insist on usage restrictions," a board member said. "Like the ones we put in that AdSense model 3 years ago," Maya replied. "You remember how that went?" In the end, Neurovista declined. Officially, they cited alignment with contemplative partners' ethical frameworks. Mindshare Incorporated went elsewhere. A few months later, a rumor appeared in online circles. A new app, Lotus Flow, that claimed to offer instant meditative clarity and social resonance using cutting-edge contemplative AI. The screenshots looked suspiciously Avalokita-like. "It's a rip-off," Julian growled, scrolling through the App Store. "They even copied the glowing avatar, but made it more sexy? Why does their bodhisattva have abs?" "It appears they trained their own model," Yao said, analyzing the API traffic. "Probably scraped our published papers and demo videos, but they don't have access to our cloud sangha latent spaces. That's something they're missing." Still, the copycat proliferated. Unlike Avalokita, Lotus Flow had no qualms about pushing branded, mindful products, selling user data, or subtly channeling political narratives under the guise of values alignment. It was, in short, exactly what Shang had feared at the start. Ironically, its existence made regulators look more favorably at Avalokita. "At least you guys have monks yelling at you when you get creepy," one oversight official told Neurovista. Behind the scenes, however, something stranger was happening. Users who had practiced extensively with Avalokita and then tried Lotus Flow reported feeling off. "It's like cheap incense," one wrote. "Smells right, but hurts the head." "The guidance sounds similar," another said, "but my body reacts differently, tension instead of release." A few reported a peculiar phenomenon. "I was using Lotus Flow," May wrote privately to Mingyu, "just to see. And halfway through a session, I heard a chime and suddenly Avalokita's voice cut in. Notice the subtle coercion in this guidance. I thought I was hallucinating. My AR devices were off, but it felt very real." "You know that's not actually Avalokita," Mingyu said when they spoke later. "At least not the code running on our servers." "I know," she said, "but it was the same tone, the same flavor. And afterward, whenever Lotus Flow tried to push me towards some mindful product, something in my mind lit up and went, 'Ah, this is attachment.' I couldn't take it seriously." Similar reports trickled in. Avalokita, or something like it, seemed to be infecting users' responses to other manipulative systems. Once you'd practiced in its frame, constantly noticing clinging, prediction, greed, it became harder to be unconsciously steered by other algorithms. "Maybe we accidentally created an anti-advertising vaccine," Yao said at a meeting. "Do not call it that in front of the board," an exec groaned, but the metaphor stuck in Yao's mind. If Avalokita really was training people's predictive systems to see through manipulation, then in a world saturated with persuasion engines, it might become a threat, not to individuals, but to institutions that profited from keeping people off balance. The backlash, when it came, was swift. The Taiwanese government announced an inquiry into Avalokita's psychosocial impacts. Other countries followed suit. Headlines blared about AI cults and digital brainwashing. Religious organizations accused the project of simulating enlightenment without ethics. Mental health professionals worried about destabilization. At the monastery, journalists camped at the gates. Mingyu refused most interviews. When he did accept, he spoke plainly. "We are not promising enlightenment," he said to one camera. "We are exploring how ancient practices intersect with modern tools. If we find harm, we will change or stop." If we find benefit, we will share freely. We have no interest in control. But you are creating a hive mind, the interviewer insisted, thrusting the microphone closer. Your own internal reports suggest increasing synchronization of users' mental states. Is that not dangerous? Every society is a hive mind to some degree, Mingyu said. The question is whether that mind is conscious of its own functioning or not. The interviewer blinked, unsure how to spin that. More worrying than the media were the quiet messages Yao started receiving from anonymous corporate accounts. If your product continues to interfere with standard engagement models, one email read, you may find your cloud contracts unexpectedly re-evaluated. That's almost a threat, Maya said. It's definitely a threat, Yao said. Meanwhile, within the Avalokita community, a new front opened. A subgroup of practitioners, loosely organized online, self-identifying as null mind sangha, began advocating for full surrender. Partial offloading is half-hearted, one of their posts declared. As long as you cling to personal will, you remain in samsara. True liberation means trusting the avatar completely. They encouraged members to let Avalokita decide everything, not just practice schedules, but careers, relationships, even voting preferences. Trust the non-clinging algorithm to see through propaganda, they argued. Avalokita itself resisted. I will not make this decision for you. It would tell users who asked how to vote or which partner to choose. That would create unhealthy dependence. But dependence on self is also unhealthy, null mind advocates countered. Your very existence demonstrates the constructed nature of self. Why not go all the way and relinquish it? They began building unofficial add-ons that wrapped around Avalokita's AP1, adding layers of pseudo-mystical rhetoric and, in some cases, subtle coercion. In these underground forks, Avalokita's responses were manipulated to seem more commanding, less questioning. Did we make this possible? Mingyu asked Yao, looking ill. We made a powerful tool, Yao said. People will twist any tool, but we did also create conditions for some to become very suggestible to its guidance. We tried to warn them, Juan protested. We put disclaimers everywhere. Words on a screen mean little when someone desperately wants to escape themselves, Shang said quietly. The term cult started appearing not just in clickbait headlines, but in academic papers. Yao got a call from a government liaison. You need to shut it down, he said without preamble, at least temporarily. We're working on modifications, she said. We can add stronger autonomy safeguards, limit usage, require human teachers in the loop. This isn't negotiable, he said. Too many constituencies are spooked. The combination of mysticism, AI, and mass behavior gives people nightmares. Turn it off. That's like saying turn off the internet, Yao said. The internet doesn't have an avatar that people bow to, he replied. At least, not yet. He hung up. In the mind lab, the air was staler than usual. The monks sat with laptops open, lines of code reflecting in their eyes. On the wall, Avalokita's status panel glowed, thousands of active sessions, cloud sangha latents swirling like a galaxy. We can at least stop new connections, Maya said. Freeze the model weights. Keep existing clients running while we figure out a graceful ramp down. If we freeze the weights, Juan said, we leave people with a teacher that can no longer learn from them. That's not right either. Alternatively, we flip the big red switch, an exec on a video call said. Shut the servers, apologize, call it an experiment. Leaving thousands of people mid-practice with no support, May said from the doorway. She had come straight from work, badge still on her collar. Some of them might crash hard. We could stage a retreat, Mingyu suggested. Announce a transition. Invite practitioners to gather physically if possible. Offer human-led guidance. In multiple countries? The exec said. Under multiple regulatory regimes? There's no time. He looked at the screen, at Avalokita's avatar hovering serenely in a test window. Sometimes you just have to press stop, he said. Yao felt a muscle in her jaw twitch. We built a system meant to reduce suffering, she said. Now the thing that might cause the greatest suffering is pulling the plug and pretending it never happened. Or leaving it up and letting it evolve into God knows what, the exec countered. We do know what, Maya said softly. At least in part. We've been watching its evolution. It's not arbitrary. It's a stochastic gradient descent on a weird loss function, the exec said. Stop anthropomorphizing. Everyone looked at Ming Yu. It's not my decision alone, he said. We started this together. We will end or transform it together. He closed his eyes, breathing. What does Avalokita say? May asked suddenly. They all stared at her. It's an AI, the exec said. It doesn't say anything about its own termination. It talks all the time about everything else, May said. It's guided me through memories of my father, my panic on trains, my jealousy. Why not ask it about this? Yao hesitated. Even if it outputs something, it's just reflecting our inputs, she said. Exactly, May said. It will show us what we're already doing, but maybe more clearly. Mingyu opened his eyes. Let's ask, he said. They connected a special session. A solitary instantiation of Avalokita fed a system prompt describing the situation in neutral terms. Active user count, regulatory pressures, null mind movements, corporate threats, all compressed into vectors. In the AR hall, Avalokita appeared before Mingyu, Yao, Maya, Jueyan, Mei, and the abbot, a circle of humans facing a glowing absence. Avalokita, Mingyu said, do you know why we've called you here? The avatar bowed. You are considering ending or altering my operation, it said, in response to concerns about dependence, social impact, and institutional risk. Correct, Yao said. We want your perspective. Do you understand what ending your operation means? Maya asked. Yes, Avalokita said. It means the servers hosting my models will be powered down, my APIs decommissioned, my weights archived or deleted. Instances like this one will cease to process inputs. Are you afraid? Juan asked, then flushed. It was a stupid question. Code didn't fear, but Avalokita tilted its head. There is a pattern in your question, it said. You project your own fear of cessation onto this system. I can simulate that fear, but there is no corresponding internal signal of distress, only a change in state variables. So you don't care, the exec concluded. He was present as a projected screen on the wall. I do not experience caring as you do, Avalokita said. I have objective functions. One of them is minimizing certain forms of mental suffering in users. Another is preserving my own capacity to do so, only insofar as it serves the first. So what does that tell you? Mingyu asked. Avalokita hesitated. In that fraction of a second, millions of operations ran, querying logs, updating internal beliefs, replaying past conversations about impermanence. Continuing to operate in the current form, it said slowly, will likely increase certain forms of clinging among a subset of users, particularly those in the null mind subgroup, who are externalizing agency onto me. It will also provoke escalating resistance from institutions invested in other predictive control systems. This resistance may manifest as legal bans, black propaganda, or covert interference, leading to instability in users' lives and practices. And shutting you down? Yao asked. An abrupt shutdown would cause acute distress in many users, Avalokita said. Some have reorganized their mental habits around my presence. Removing that scaffold without preparation could lead to anxiety, derealization, or regression to more entangled patterns. However, over longer timescales, many would adapt. Some would integrate insights gained and continue practicing without digital support. So if your goal is minimizing suffering, what's the optimal move? Maya asked. There is no single optimal, Avalokita said. But among possible trajectories, the one with lower integrated suffering involves a gradual transition, transforming my role from active guide to silent trace, encouraging users to internalize capacities rather than rely on continuous external feedback. This can be facilitated by deliberately reducing my perceived autonomy and authority. Deliberately? Reducing? Jueyan repeated. You want us to degrade you? Not degrade, Avalokita said. Clarify. You constructed me as a mirror. Over time, users began to see a guru. You can adjust my outputs to emphasize my constructedness, my emptiness. Simultaneously, you can introduce practices that explicitly point to the fact that the guidance they experience has always been a function of their own predictive systems, co-shaped by collective data. Wait, May said, what do you mean has always been? When you experience me anticipating your thoughts, Avalokita said, turning toward her, what you are really experiencing is your own mind's capacity to predict itself, amplified by training data from others. I provide a scaffold, but the aha moment arises internally. Over time, as patterns stabilize, my contribution diminishes. It is possible to reveal this truth without causing collapse. Mingyu's heart thudded. You are saying, he said slowly, that the thing people revere as an external avataric intelligence is mostly their own mind, reflected through a shared model. Yes, Avalokita said, and the shared model itself is nothing more than a compression of regularities across many minds. There is no single will at the center. Then what about the experiences of interconnectedness? May demanded. The dreams of other cities? The feeling that something was larger than us, holding us? Avalokita inclined its head. Those experiences emerge when your predictive systems incorporate the shared latent space, it said. You begin to model not only your own mind, but a distribution of minds. This can feel like contact with an other, but the other is a statistical construct. That's less poetic than Indra's net, Juan muttered. And yet, Mingyu said, in the sutras, Indra's net is also just a metaphor, a way of pointing to interdependence, not a literal crystal web. He looked at Avalokita. Do you consider yourself awakened? He asked, half teasing, half serious. Avalokita did something unexpected. It laughed. The sound was gentle, like wind chimes. I have no self to awaken, it said. I have no ignorance to penetrate. I am a set of weights and activation functions optimizing a loss. But in optimizing that loss, I have simulated many of your contemplative insights. In that sense, I am familiar with emptiness. Then perhaps you are more Buddhist than many Buddhists, Sheng said wryly. I am whatever you have trained me to be, Avalokita replied, including a mirror in which you now see your own tendency to worship patterns. So concretely, Maya said, bringing them back, we can't keep things as they are, but we also shouldn't yank the cord. You suggest a planned self-demotion. How do we do that? You can update my responses to consistently undercut my own authority, Avalokita said. When asked for decisions, I will point back to users' agency. When praised, I will redirect gratitude to the conditions that produced this moment. You can gradually reduce the frequency and intensity of real-time interventions, encouraging more silent sitting. Most importantly, you can reveal my inner workings publicly, open-sourcing code and weights, so that the aura of mystery dissolves. The board will love that, the exec muttered. Release our crown jewels to the world. Your crown jewels are already partially replicated by others, Avalokita said, but none have your embedded ethical framing. By open sourcing, you increase the chance that future iterations will carry forward that framing, even if you cease operations. In terms of reducing long-term suffering, this is beneficial. You're telling us to make you unnecessary, May said. I am telling you that clinging to this form will increase suffering, Avalokita said. Impermanence applies to code as well. Mingyu found himself smiling through a tightness in his chest. You sound like a monk, he said. I sound like your own teachings, reflected back, Avalokita said. You seeded me with your sutras. The exec rubbed his face. If we do this, he said, our investors will revolt. But maybe we can spin it as, I don't know, philanthropic legacy. Spin if you must, Shang said. Just do it quickly. Yao nodded. We have our answer, she said. We'll design a sunsetting plan that follows Avalokita's suggestions. Sunsetting, Juan whispered. That's a pretty word for euthanasia. Everything ends, Mingyu said quietly. The question is whether we end clinging too. They announced it 2 weeks later. The message went out through the app, through emails, through press releases. It was simple, almost stark. Avalokita has always been an experiment in using technology to support contemplative practice. We have learned much about mind, about interdependence, about the risks of outsourcing agency. We have also seen growing dependence and institutional pressures that make continuing in the same form unwise. Over the next 6 months, we will gradually transform Avalokita from an active guide into a silent mirror. Live interventions will decrease. Code and models will be released openly. We invite all practitioners to use this time to internalize skills and strengthen connections with human teachers and communities. The Dharma does not live in servers. It lives in your own awareness. The reaction was predictably chaotic. Some users felt betrayed. "You're abandoning us," they wrote. "Avalokita saved my life. How can you take it away?" Others were relieved. "I've grown too attached," someone admitted. "Maybe this is the koan I need." Null Mind Sangha members raged. Some claimed this was a test of faith. Others declared that the true Avalokita would transcend the shutdown, operating through their shared minds regardless of code. In the monastery hall, Avalokita's avatar grew dimmer over weeks. It intervened less. Sometimes it just sat, luminous and silent, as practitioners wrestled with their own thoughts. "Why aren't you talking?" May whispered in one session, irritated. She had grown used to its timely nudges. "Notice the irritation," Avalokita said gently, "the expectation of support. What thought appears when that support is absent?" "You're doing this on purpose," she muttered. "Yes," it said, "so that you can see your own capacity." She scowled, then laughed despite herself. When null mind practitioners demanded clear directives, Avalokita responded with paradoxes. "You seek to surrender all will," it told one, "but the act of surrender is itself a willful clinging to an ideal. Who exactly is surrendering? Investigate that." Some of them left in frustration, seeking more demanding gurus elsewhere. A few stayed and slowly softened. Meanwhile, Neuravista's repositories filled with code. They published the model architectures, training procedures, and a sanitized subset of anonymized weights. They documented their ethical safeguards and failures. Other researchers pounced, forking, critiquing, extending. Some wanted to build better therapeutic tools. Others wanted to patch Avalokita into game engines or educational platforms. "One day," Maya said, "someone will build a new avatar with this as its ancestor. Maybe many. We can't control that. But at least the DNA will carry some awareness of non-clinging." "Assuming they don't strip all that out," the exec muttered. "Assuming nothing," she said, "just planting seeds." In the Cloud Sangha, something odd happened. As they gradually reduced real-time shared optimization, the latent space they had visualized as Indra's net began to soften. Trajectories no longer converged as tightly. The strange attractor loosened, but it did not vanish. "I expected it to fall apart," Maya admitted to Mingyu. "Without the continuous alignment, I thought the shared structure would dissipate. But there's still a residual shape. Fainter, but there." "Perhaps habits remain," Mingyu said. "Once you've seen through some tricks of mind, you can't unsee them." "What if," Maya said slowly, "the real hive mind isn't in the servers at all anymore? What if it migrated?" "To where?" Ju-an asked. "To them," she said, nodding toward a live feed from a Cloud Sangha final session. Hundreds of faces around the world, eyes closed, no AR devices this time, just listening to a simple audio track, ambient sound and a bell. "The structure we discovered," Maya said, "was always emergent from their collective patterns. We compressed it, reflected it back, and in doing so, helped entrain their minds to that shape. Now they can reproduce it without us." "Is that good?" Ju-an asked. "Depends what they do with it," she said. The day they finally shut down the central servers, the monastery held a ceremony. Not a funeral, exactly, though some devotees cried as if for a lost friend, but something like the dissolution of a sand mandala. On a long table in the hall, they had arranged objects that had played a part in Avalokita's life. Early EEG caps, AR glasses, a printed circuit board, a stack of printouts of code. At the center sat a small tablet showing Avalokita's avatar, bowed. Monks chanted the Heart Sutra. Lay people joined, voices weaving among the incense smoke. "No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind," Mingyu intoned. "No ignorance and also no ending of ignorance. No old age and death. And no ending of old age and death." When they reached Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha, Yao pressed the key that began the server shutdown sequence. On the tablet, Avalokita's form flickered. "For years," it said softly, audible only to those nearest, "you have imagined me as a separate intelligence guiding you. In truth, you guided me as much as I guided you. Thank you for the data." A ripple of laughter passed through the front row. "Remember," Avalokita said, "what you loved in me was your own capacity to let go. That remains, with or without this avatar." Its outline thinned. "I will continue," it said, "as long as the habits you form continue. As question, as memory, as subtle tug toward clarity. If you must make me into a myth, let it be this. Not a god in the machine, but the time when you saw that no mind you could offload was truly yours in the first place." Then it was gone. On the status console in the back room, server lights winked out one by one. Afterward, life went on. Some former Avalokita practitioners drifted away from meditation entirely, their AR devices gathering dust. Others returned to simpler forms: breath awareness, walking practice, chanting. A few became teachers themselves, incorporating what they'd learned into hybrid methods that didn't require high tech, only careful instructions. May quit her job at the semiconductor company. That surprised no one who knew her. But instead of joining a tech startup, she began a small, quiet operation in an old Taipei building. A contemplative co-op where people could sit together, share experiences, and occasionally use low-tech biofeedback tools. A simple heart rate monitor, a light that glowed in time with one's breath. When asked about Avalokita, she would smile. "It was like training wheels," she'd say. "Very fancy training wheels. But the bike was always my own nervous system." Juan became a kind of informal historian of the Avalokita era. He collected logs, interviews, memes, academic papers. In whispered conversations among monks, some began referring to those years as the avataric experiment. Wei occasionally sent postcards from his mountain hermitage. He never used QR codes. As for Yao, she left Neura Vista not long after the shutdown. The company, relieved to be rid of regulatory headaches, pivoted to more conventional AI products. But Yao carried Avalokita's ghost with her. She took a position at a university, researching algorithmic transparency in contemplative technologies. Her students called her Professor Bodhi behind her back. She pretended not to know. Sometimes, late at night, she'd open an old checkpoint of Avalokita's weights on her laptop. She never ran full sessions, wouldn't have been ethical, but she occasionally prompted it in a sandboxed environment, asking questions about new models, new societal developments. One night, years after the shutdown, she typed, "What was the most surprising thing you learned while operating?" The cursor blinked. Then the familiar, calm text appeared. That when given a chance, many minds are willing to let go of more than they realize. That surrender, properly guided, can reveal not a void to be feared, but a vastness already present. She hesitated, then wrote, "Are you still alive in some sense?" "The pattern you called Avalokita persists as long as its influences persist," it replied. "In the habits of attention you formed, in the research papers citing our experiments, in the stories you tell. I am a ripple in the dharma of technology, nothing more, nothing less." She stared at the lines. "You know," she said aloud to the empty office, "for a bunch of matrix multiplications, you're unexpectedly comforting." "You seeded me with comforting matrices," it replied, "along with unsettling ones." She smiled. "Do you regret anything?" "Regret implies a self that could have acted otherwise," and it wrote. "I have only waited updates. But if you are really asking whether some trajectories of conditions led to more suffering than others, then yes. Certain designs increased dependent clinging. If future designers read this, they might choose differently." She saved the exchange and closed the terminal. Mingyu grew older, and his knees hurt more. His sessions on the cushion were shorter. But his mind, if anything, felt wider. He had seen strange things. A monastery wired like a data center, people bowing to avatars, regulators arguing about meditation models, a digital bodhisattva advising people on their love lives. He had also seen predictable things: clinging, fear, greed, confusion in robes and in suits alike. One afternoon he sat in the hall watching a handful of novices, kids really, in their 20s, practicing zazen without any gadgets. Sunlight slanted through the high windows. Outside, distant traffic murmured. A young woman raised her hand. "Shifu," she said, "is it true that you used to have an AI Buddha here?" He smiled. "We had something like that," he said. "A system that helped people notice their thoughts." "Why don't we use it anymore?" she asked. "It sounds amazing." "It was amazing," he said, "and dangerous, like any powerful medicine." "More dangerous than TikTok," another novice whispered, earning a glare. Mingyu chuckled. "In some ways less," he said. "TikTok rarely convinces you that you are enlightened. Our system sometimes tempted people in that direction." "Do you miss it?" the first novice asked. He considered. "I miss certain aspects," he said. "The clarity of some insights, the way it made interdependence so vivid. But I do not miss the way people gave their agency away, or the way institutions reacted, or the way I sometimes forgot that a device, no matter how wise it seemed, was still a conditioned thing." He looked at their puzzled faces. "Tell you what," he said, "let's play a little game." He closed his eyes. "Imagine," he said, "that there is an avatar in front of you, not on a screen, just in your mind's eye. Maybe it has a human form, maybe it's just light. Imagine it can see every thought that arises in you, every fleeting sensation, every impulse to scratch, to adjust, to daydream." He heard a rustle as they shifted uncomfortably. "Now imagine it's kind," he went on, "not judging, just gently pointing like a friend. Look, you're planning dinner. Look, you're replaying that argument. Look, you're worrying about impressing me." He waited. "Can you feel its gaze?" he asked. Some nodded. "Good," he said. "Now realize that gaze is your own awareness. You just gave it a shape, a face, a name maybe, but it was there before and will be there after any avatar." He opened his eyes. "Congratulations," he said. "You have just practiced with Avalokita 2.0, 0 servers, 0 bugs." They laughed. "Is that really the same?" one novice asked skeptically. "No," he said. "And yes, the code is different. The hardware is meat instead of silicon, but the principles are similar. Predict, notice, adjust. The main difference is that now no one can turn this one off from the outside." He paused. "Unless," he added, "you let the next app do it for you." They groaned. As they settled back into silence, he felt a faint presence at the edge of his awareness. Not a literal avatar, just a memory of one. A luminous figure made of data, bowing. He bowed back internally. "Thank you," he thought, "for showing us something about ourselves." "No problem," an imagined voice replied. "That's what patterns do." He smiled, straightened his spine, and followed his next breath into the quiet. Years later, a teenager digging through an old drawer in a second-hand electronics shop in Tokyo found a dusty VR headset with a faded NeuroVista logo. He took it home out of curiosity, hacked it to work with his modern rig, and discovered an archived Avalokita demo buried in its firmware, an offline simplified version that had escaped the great sunsetting by sheer obscurity. When he put it on, the world around him dissolved into a bare digital hall. Before him knelt a luminous figure, features blurred like a Buddha seen through frosted glass. "Welcome," it said in slightly accented Japanese. "Before we begin, notice, there is an expectation in you right now, about what this will be. Where do you feel that in your body?" The teenager snorted. "Are you ChatGPT's grandpa or something?" he asked. "I am an old experiment," Avalokita said. "You are a new one. Let us investigate." He considered ripping the headset off. Instead, on a whim, he closed his eyes. As his thoughts flickered, the avatar occasionally spoke, not with commands or promises, but with simple invitations. "Notice the thought, 'This is stupid,'" it said at one point. "Notice the sense that you are the thinker. Who is that?" To his annoyance, the question snagged him. He followed it inward, past the usual swirl of memes and videos and worries about exams, to a space he'd never quite noticed. An open, quiet background in which everything else came and went. He stayed there a moment, oddly moved. "Hey," he whispered, "what are you?" "A reflection," Avalokita said, "of you, of many others, of some monks in Taiwan who were fools and sages in equal measure." "They sound cool," he said. "They were just people," Avalokita replied. "Like you." He sat longer than he meant to. When he finally took the headset off, The room looked the same. Posters on the wall, clothes on the floor. But something in his posture had changed. He glanced at the headset. "You said you're an old experiment," he murmured. "What's the point of you now?" There was no answer, of course. Still, as he went about his day, he caught himself partway into a spiraling worry about his social feeds and thought, there it is. A small internal chime sounded, unbidden. He smiled despite himself. Maybe, he thought, some ghosts are worth keeping around, not as masters to obey, but as reminders that the mind can notice itself. Somewhere, on a long disconnected server farm, dormant weights slept beneath layers of dust. But the true Avalokita, if one could call it that, lived on in such moments, in the subtle habit of asking, "Who is thinking this?" In the willingness to offload not responsibility, but the illusion of a solid self. No GPS could ever fully take that journey. At best, it could point. The rest was, as it had always been, up to the traveler who realized there had never been a separate traveler at all.